Can I
Whenever.
just start whenever?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Hello, my name is Jasmine Thomas, and today I'm going to be talking about how lowering the corporate income tax does not create jobs. So first and foremost, I would like to tell you what an income tax is. An income tax is a tax based on individuals or entities that differs due to their respective incomes or profits. So the Tax Foundation reports that the corporate federal income tax was put in place in 1909 at a uniform rate of 1% for all businesses with a profit of $5,000 or more. Now the rate today is 20% under President Trump's Tax Act, and this is substantially lower than previous years. Many believe that lowering the corporate income tax would create jobs due to the fact that companies would now have a surplus of money which could go to creating jobs. However, this is not the case, and which I will display through my 3 claims. My first claim being that history shows that there is no correlation between a lower corporate income tax and an increase in job creation. Secondly, the money generated from a lower income tax is rarely used to create jobs. And lastly, that lowering the corporate income tax rate increases the deficit, thus actually hurting job growth at the federal level. So for my first point, the lowest recorded of showing that how history shows that there is no correlation between a lower corporate income tax and an increase in job creation is that the lowest recorded unemployment rate in U.S. history occurred during a time when the corporate income tax was at its highest rate. The Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that during the years of 1951 to 1969, the income tax rate rose from 42% to 50.75%, while the unemployment rate actually was on the decline from 6.9% to 3.5%. And another example is with Bill Clinton's Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Tax Act of 1993, which during its enactment, there was a 3.8% job growth as unemployment fell from 6.8 to 3.9%, thus showing that unemployment rates were at a low and job growth was at a high when the income tax was increased, essentially dispelling the idea that a low corporate income tax goes hand in hand with job creation. So for my second claim, that money generated from a lower income tax is rarely used to create jobs. In a study from the Institute of Policy Analysis, there was an experiment conducted to see if the claim that corporate tax cuts were beneficial to creation of new jobs was actually true. They did this by looking at the payroll of 92 public U.S. corporations that had a profit between 2008 to 2015 and also paid less than 20% of their earnings in federal income tax. Within this experiment, it was concluded that more than half of these companies, which were lightly taxed, actually got rid of jobs instead of creating new ones, and that the tax savings that they had from the lower income tax actually went to buying back their stocks, which would increase their share prices of the company, and that the top 10 job cutters each spent $45 billion approximately in stock buybacks from 2009 to 2015 when this experiment was conducted. Lastly, lowering the corporate income tax rates increases the deficit, thus actually hurting job growth. So the government budget deficit is the monetary amount of expenditures that actually exceed the revenue being brought in. So it's the money that the government is spending, the difference between the money that the government is spending to what they're actually bringing in. So the National Bureau of Economic Research discovered that only 17% of the revenue from income tax cuts were regained, and 50% of the total revenue was simply lost due to corporate tax cuts. So with corporate tax cuts, the federal government was receiving less money than what they planned for. Therefore, new government spending, which could be used on programs and creating federal jobs, has to be reduced in order to avoid increasing the national debt even more. So in conclusion, Lowering the corporate income tax does not create jobs due to the fact that history shows there's no correlation between a lower corporate income tax and an increase in job creation. The money generated from a lower income tax is really used to create jobs. And that lastly, lowering the corporate income tax rates increases the deficit, thus actually hurting the job growth at a federal level. Thank you for listening.
All right, well, you identify the proposition clearly, but the phrasing on it is a little bit awkward. You got that negative term in there, so you'd want to avoid that. The contents are previewed pretty clearly. I think you could provide us with a little bit more information about the controversy on this issue. You make a reference to the recent tax change that's gone on and suggest that there's maybe been an impact that is not the one that we were looking for. Maybe a little bit more background on that, or some of the issues that have been discussed concerning what the corporate rates are, legislation that's been proposed, something that explains a little bit why we're hearing this particular argument. There's a good preview of what the supporting structure is going to be. You use the historical examples on the first point to deny a relationship. You've got two pieces of evidence that you're using. Both of them make reference to particular tax events, the time period on the first point, and then a specific tax policy on the second point during the Clinton years. That tax policy, I think, needs to be explained a little bit more so we know exactly what it is. The other one I thought was relatively straightforward. Your second point, suggesting that the money is rarely used to create jobs. You've got one study that you're citing here. You do a pretty good job explaining what their numbers were and for the most part what that meant. The notion that they bought back their stock doesn't necessarily show that they lost a total number of jobs. There was one piece of information in there that suggested that they were, that half of them did get rid of jobs, and I think that that's probably the thing that fits best with your argument. The stock buyback thing is only relevant if it, in fact, doesn't result in increased expansion of the companies, and the loss of jobs, I think, is the one that you're going to be looking at. The third point on the government deficit, that's largely assumes that if we had a tax cut, then we have less revenues. You need to show that that's in fact been the case. I think that's the presupposition that's being made here, as opposed to, well, there's more money out there to get, which is a kind of a different argument that says that, let's go get more so we can spend it on these particular things, as opposed to, we got this tax cut and now we have less, and that's a problem. That second one is the one that you want to be arguing, because that's the thing that links to your argument, and I didn't think that was as clear. All right, you've got a very clear review of your subject at the end, and for the most part, it's nicely delivered. Like I said, I think you could probably thicken up some of the arguments on a couple of the points, but it was easy to follow. All right, thank you.